Thank you. Feels like I'm standing in a hole next to Carlos. Thank you very much.
I saw your reaction when we cut the scene. You expected it to lay off a little bit?
Yeah, there was. First of all, thank you for having me. This is, as I prepared for today, it's been a real impactful week. Because what happens is, as you try to put a message out there, or invited to put a message out there, to be a keynote, I looked at all the work that you've been doing here this week, but all the work that you've been doing all your lives, really, as educators, and as those you are educating, the students are here. We are not doing something that is casual. You are dealing with people's lives in your hands. And students, you are dealing with your very own life, sense of existence and being and breath. And with that in mind, I want to honor all of you in this room. Those who have come because they are part of the big picture already, those who are impacted by the big picture, and those who have come who are wary and wondering if they should join this movement. Your questioning and challenging is as important as the work, because you force them to live up to the values that they claim and embrace and are actually trying to realize. So the first moment of this morning I wanted to point out is how valuable, important, and precious the work that you are doing is to our humanity and very existence on this earth. And my mother was an educator for 40 years. And I watched her change thousands of kids' lives. And I just wanted to thank you for the thousands upon thousands upon thousands whose lives you are changing. So thank you. And thank you for having me. The reason I jumped at the end, that's a good scene, man, and you cut off the best part. And I know y'all cursed because your founder cursed. He dropped the F-bomb. They had a little cursing in there, so I think they cut it out because of that. It's actually a true story, that scene. The father of a woman I was dating grew up in Oklahoma in the 30s. In the height of segregation. And he said, he always told me that even in the midst of that challenge, there was always a sense of community. And everyone knew that the idea of being able to get an education was a rare thing because so many people were doing everything possible so people wouldn't get an education. Because there are those who do not have our best interest at heart. You will hear that a lot from me this morning. Remember that. There are those who do not have our best interests at heart. And he said that he was a principal's son. His father his father was the principal of the black high school in Oklahoma. And so he went to this party and all the thugs from the neighborhood were there. And they said, you know, you're not supposed to be here, schoolboy. We may not get the chance that you're gonna have, and we're going to make sure as a community that you get the chance. So they would never let him be in a situation where his opportunity was at risk. Even then, with them embracing a life of thuggery, they had a sense of community and they knew what was important, which was him getting his education. And so I was talking about that, and one of the writers put it in the scene. Omar, for those of you who don't know, I was talking to, is a homicidal killer in The Wire with a sense of a man must have a code. So he would never rob anyone who wasn't in the game, who wasn't dealing drugs or whatever. He never cursed. He never did any killing on Sundays. A man must have a code. But the thing was, we discovered that he and I went to the same high school, Edmondson High School in Baltimore. And I learned from a lot of police officers who were African American that the reason they became police officers is because they didn't think the 1% or the less than 1% of the criminality that was happening in their communities reflected the good people of their community. And so that was one of the things I discovered of why they became police officers, and to actually deal with that conflict. And so we wanted to reflect that in the show of The Wire, of how those who are inflicting pain in the community actually know, people know who they are. And that the police officers were actually who were African American, were very tied into who the criminals are. They knew them. And Omar and Bunk literally went to the same high school. And that scene is is the struggle of the community then going back and forth of how they're going to deal with it. And I know you guys visited Ferguson on your trip here, so these are issues that we wanted to put on the forefront of the show. I'm long-winded. We only have a couple of minutes, so I will shut up now and turn to Mr. Marine.
All good. You're making my job a lot easier here, so I appreciate that. So I want to go back to this. You referenced it several times in your opening monologue just now.
Okay.
About the sense of community. And I know you were, again, mentioned that you were born and raised in New Orleans, and you've done a significant amount of work in your beloved community. How are those efforts to help rebuild Pontchartrain Park coming along? And for us as educators that always really focus on everything really being a learning experience for young people, what have you learned about yourself during that process?
Well, wow, that's a really good question. And you actually sent it to me, and I read it, and I still don't know how to answer.
This is what we do.
That's good. It's the big picture. First of all, my name is Wendell Pierce, and I'm an actor. That's who, while some of you know me, most of you probably don't. And I was invited, while my father thinks I was invited here for my charm and good looks. It probably has more to do with the fact that I am a son of an educator whose family's legacy has always been to teach that you are a part of a community, and a sense of that your family is extended by community. So an unhealthy community means that you have an unhealthy family, which means you personally are unhealthy and dysfunctional. So you cannot live in a community where there's dysfunction and be a part of it and be insular and think that it has nothing to do with you. And that's the sense of how I was brought up. I became an actor because art, and especially you saw these talented young people just now. Art is not just entertainment. Entertainment is a byproduct of art. Art is the place where you reflect on who you are, where we gather together and reflect on who we are. When you lie awake at night with thoughts are to the individual, where they reflect on who they are, where they've been, where they hope to go. Art is to the community, where we gather and collectively reflect on where we've been, where we hope to go, what our values are, declare what our values are, but then most importantly, to then act on them. That is the forum of art. I became an artist because of that. And it's because of that, my family taught me that is the same sense of community. The specifics. Pontchartrain Park was brought up in New Orleans in the darkest days of segregation. Black people couldn't go into the parks except one day, Negro Day, Wednesdays. If your black ass was caught in the park on any other day, you would be arrested. green, open space black folks couldn't go to. A.P. Turo led a civil rights march in New Orleans for access to green space for black people who were picking cotton in the biggest green space there is for centuries, but they couldn't go into parks in New Orleans. As a result of that, Pontchartrain Park was an appeasement, separate but equal. Post-World War II neighborhood adjacent to a white neighborhood where we couldn't buy homes, but the same builders, and they put a ditch, the DMZ I call it, right between us. Pontchartrain Park and Gentilly Woods. But in Pontchartrain Park, we took something ugly and made it beautiful. 1,000 homes around a golf course designed by Joseph Bartholomew, who was African-American, designed most of the courses in New Orleans, but couldn't play on them. But he designed this for the community and people that he loved and the game that he loved. And out of Pontchartrain Park, teachers and lawyers and doctors and laborers and postal workers, ditch diggers, grave diggers came together and built one of the strongest African-American communities in post-World War II. And out of it, it became an incubator of talent. Terrence Blanchard, the jazz musician and Grammy winner, our first black mayor, Dutch Morial, Mark Morial, his son, who became mayor and is now president of the National Urban League, who's having their conference here in town and in this hotel with us. Our first black DA, Eddie Jordan. And all of my teachers lived in the neighborhood, and my mother taught at the school, Cog Hill Elementary School, 2 blocks from my home. And I would come home in the evenings, and they would say, Pierce, he has homework. You know, 'cause all my teachers were in the living room having a cocktail with my mother after school. I'm like, I can't win for losing. And that was the community that I grew up in. Lisa Jackson, I grew up with her, the first EPA director under the Obama administration. So I knew I had a lot of, it was like a black Mayberry. It really was. Golf course, 1,000 homes, you could do anything. You had your school there. And it was at the deepest part of the flooding. And so this Moses generation that fought and marched to make sure that we had a great school and a great community to grow up in spite of all the challenges of segregation, because 2 blocks away in the white neighborhood, with the same houses, literally 2 blocks away, because education in the 50s was separate, but equal. Claiborne Elementary School got more money than we did, got more resources, because, as we all know, that trick of tying education funding into the value of the neighborhood, of the assessment of the properties, and they always assess poor people and people of color's houses as less valuable than these houses, which were the same ones by the same builder, 2 blocks away, as being less valuable, so our school got less money and less resources, and Claiborne got more. Claiborne, by the way, was a Confederate general. The school was named after him. So I saw that growing up. We were in the deepest part of the flooding, and I said, the one lesson I learned was exercise your right of self-determination. Exercise your right of self-determination. So I said, it is incumbent upon us, the Joshua generation, that benefited from all of these hardworking, sacrificing mothers and fathers and grandparents who built Pontchartrain Park, that Moses generation. We owed it to them to rebuild it in spite of the flooding. In spite of the fact that we were destroyed, 20 feet of water where our home sat for 3 months, where people said, it's not coming back. And I said, they fought too long and hard. They gave too much and sacrificed their lives for us to give up now. So I put out a call to action to people of my generation to come back to exercise our right of self-determination, and we negotiated with the government to get the properties that were given back by people who are given up so that we can develop them, and by brick, block by block, house by house, we have rebuilt Pontchartrain Park today. That is community. That is activism. I always tell my community, don't just come and complain. I'll clear the table. What's your solution? What are you going to do? Exercise your right of self-determination. And what I learned was, don't let anyone tell you you cannot be impactful as an individual, that you can't change the world as an individual. As Nassim was saying, Hamilton changed the world because he, like Nassim, they had something valuable, they had self-worth. And the work that you're doing with BPL is making sure that no matter where you are on the spectrum of opportunity, enlightenment, accessibility, you still can be impactful. And that's the thing that I learned. Because my grandfather said a long time ago, Kant died 3 days before the creation of the world. So don't ever tell me you can't do something. And so I try to live by that. And I've learned that I can, no matter what, use my platform and change people's lives.
Indeed. So on this...
Amen.
We're in church. So considering we're now in St. Louis, right? Another community, far from your home. Same way we did in New Orleans for our conference in 2015, our focus is always to embed our conference within a particular community, to learn about the successes, the talents of a community, the challenges, the rich history, the good and the bad. This August will be the 3rd anniversary of the killing of Michael Brown. I'm sorry, I'm going too far, y'all. Yesterday, we had about 60 of our participants here, students, teachers, teacher leaders, have a Leaving to Learn session in Ferguson. They got to meet all of the folks, all of the players, some that were involved when Michael Brown was murdered, some that came on board afterwards. What would you say, as we always talk about exploring the capacity of leaders and wanting to be an organization that respond to racially charged incidents, especially as students live in these communities? What would you say are some of the key lessons that us as a body of educators, many of which work in these communities again, should glean from that tragedy and the many events that have followed over the past 3 years since Michael Brown's death?
First, as educators, I was saying this morning to some of the kids, I learned a long time ago, your first wealth is health. If you're a spiritual person, it's your faith. But right there, the first wealth you have is knowledge. The first wealth in life is knowledge. People for centuries did everything possible at the threat of death to make sure some of us didn't acquire knowledge. There are those who do not have our best interest at heart. And that is a continuum. It is not something that ended generations ago. It actually morphs. It's amorphic and changes with every generation. It becomes some different incarnation where you killed a slave if you found them reading. After emancipation, you just made sure that they didn't read by making sure that they couldn't get into schools. We never had a problem with public education in this country until Brown versus Board of Education. Oh, we're going to have to actually give equal education to some poor black folks? Well, now I will spend the rest of my millennium making sure that doesn't happen. We have to face America's original sin. That's the best way to put it. America's original sin. It's the world's original sin also, because I know we have people from the international community here. There are those who do not have our best interests at heart and make money and profit from making sure there's an class and an uneducated class.
Yeah, preach.
Okay? That will always be. So we have to be vigilant about it and understand it. We literally are sitting, have you gone across the street to the courthouse? That's where the Dred Scott case was. For those of you who don't know what the Dred Scott case was, in 1857, Dred Scott, a slave, was taken to a free state and sued for his freedom. And the Supreme Court of the United States decided you are not, as an African American, a citizen of this country. You were never considered to be a part of this country, and you are not considered a human being. You are a piece of property. That was my mother's grandfather's time. It was not that long ago, 1857. With emancipation, then the next one was, we're going to make sure Plessy versus Ferguson. When you came to New Orleans, you should have visited that courthouse, or actually that train station where Plessy got on to challenge Jim Crow laws. Just to sit in the white car, you don't have the right to say you are equal. And that was a generation later. And then a generation later, Brown versus Board of Education happened. You now have the right to get equal education. And then came the Voting Rights Act. I put all of that in perspective to say it is a continuum and a fight that is ongoing. Don't get lapsed into the idea that it comes to an end. And so we have to embolden our students with the power and the tools of knowledge to understand, to put that in perspective, and to understand that Michael Brown is in the continuum of the bounty hunters who looked for slaves, who in my state of Louisiana, then when emancipation came, they said, how can we still enslave them? Oh, I will make sure to come up with laws to put them back on the plantation, because it's going to be called a prison. So we will then put them in prison back on the plantation. To this day, 2017, you can visit Angola Prison in Louisiana, which is a working plantation. The state of Louisiana makes money from the Negroes out there growing sugarcane in Zachary, Louisiana, a working plantation. We have privatized prisons to make sure that this enslavement continues. How do you privatize a prison? You make sure that money is made when it's filled. The only way you make money is if a prison is filled. The only way you fill that prison is you make sure that there's some antiquated laws that make sure it's very, very tight, to make sure that if there's any interaction between a young man and the law, that he is now in a system where if he makes any other mistake, he's then gone for life and he goes into that prison. We make money off of him. So how do we keep that criminal class going? Along with the antiquated laws, an uneducated class ultimately becomes a criminal class, because I make sure he has no skill set, no opportunity. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. So then to combat that, we have to give the Michael Browns in the world every tool possible so that they can be successful. Where you have a different way of approaching education and making sure that someone finds, the one thing you have to find is the love and passion for what you do. And that's why you have the different models and programs that Big Picture does. We're going to have a student-centered education system, because the other education systems may not inspire that student. It is incumbent upon us to inspire the student, to get them to the place to find out what that passion is. Because I'm an actor, it's not my occupation. It's my vocation, the thing that I'm called to do. I'm fortunate to have it be an occupation, the thing that I earn a living at, but I accept that one day it won't be my occupation. But it'll always be my vocation. We have to find the vocations for the students, because that emboldens them, that gives them the wealth of knowledge, so that they can then deal with all of the challenges and obstacles that are placed in front of them in life. You exercise the muscle of the brain like you exercise the body, so that it can be prepared for the challenges of life. And one of the greatest challenges that they're going to face for some of the students that you have is a system that does not have their best interest at heart. So you have to imbue them with that, the love of self, the love of the vision of what they want to do, and that vocation, so that they say, no matter what, in spite of everyone else's opinion about me, I love myself. And that they can have the courage to do what they need to do. Everyone is impacted by fear. But courage is acting in the face of fear. And that is what you give a student when you empower them with the tools of knowledge and the understanding of their place in history, and then knowing that there's a continuum of people who do not have your best interest at heart. But knowing that when they walk out that door, you are prepared to deal with them, whether it's the specifics of how you deal with a police encounter, or also to know, like my parents taught me, you are suspect. The minute you walk out of this door, you're suspect. You're criminally suspect, and then even after going to Juilliard, when I walk into an audition room, you are artistically suspect. I don't think he has the chops. He may not be able to do this job. I don't think they have the ability. When I'm suspect, as a woman, as a person of this class or that class, you know, we always talk about race, and I talk about race, but you know, if you eliminated people of color, people will find a way to go, he's left-handed. Them left-handed people, ooh, you know, they lazy, and they don't know, come on, y'all from Washington. Man, they from Portland. They're not from Seattle. We got to watch that. People are going, it's an ugly part of human nature, so you have to prepare that person to go out there and know that they're a suspect. I actually wasn't going to say this, but listen, you worked all hard this week and you had fun and everything, and I know I'm going to try to be brief so we can get to our last baby back ribs in St. Louis before we all go to the airport. But let's really have a real moment here. I've been working with BPL on a short film. I wasn't going to bring this up, but I owe this to Elliot, actually, because we never had a conversation about it. They thought I wasn't going to show up today because I got mad in the studio the other day. By accident, implied, whether it was or wasn't, there was a miscommunication, but it landed on me a certain way. And it was just this animated film, and in it is this beautiful little black girl, and they had to change a couple of lines. It was communicated to me that the lines had to be changed because it didn't read realistic that she would own a company. I said, what? You know, whether that was true or not, just the idea of that threw me. And I said, what do you mean she can't? Well, it may have come off the wrong way. I'm not at liberty to say that. I'm like, wait, forget whether it happened or not. We can't tell our kids that this little girl, because she happens to have a darker hue and curlier hair, cannot own a company because she didn't go to college. That's what we're going to put out there. But then I realized I can't be mad at the folks who are trying to put together this film or BPL or whatever. We are seen as suspect. Ava DuVernay did Selma, and Paramount was on that lot every day. I don't think, can she handle a $20 million movie? She's a black woman. Every generation, all of a sudden, girls' trip comes out. Oh my God, it's a breakthrough. Hell, where were you 20 years ago? We're waiting to exhale. All these, it's a first. Oh man, women can do this. Oh, Wonder Woman came out. Where the hell have you been? I did not like the work that she was doing. She was actually doing an awful thing. But Leni Riefenstahl was a woman and one of the great filmmakers of our time. Unfortunately, she was a Nazi. You know? The ability of people, the idea of being suspect is the thing that endangers Mike Brown's and Philando Castile and James DuBose. But here's the thing, knowledge empowers us. Mike Brown's case isn't over. It was one DA who had one grand jury who said, I don't think we should bring up charges. It's not double jeopardy. If you are acquitted of a trial, then they can't try you again. If they don't bring you up on charges, well, you get another DA in there, find the evidence, and bring him up on charges. We cannot just let it sit aside. That's the knowledge that you have. If you don't want to do something about it, step out of the way. Yes, march on Ferguson, but vote that DA out of office and put someone in office who are going to bring the charges. In St. Louis, my name is Wendell Pierce. Darren Wilson needs to be charged. That's the power of the knowledge that you give to the kids to say, all right, well, now I have a way to figure out how to do this. We're going to have two fronts. Yeah, we're going to march every day, but now we have to put in action. Exercise your right of self-determination. I'm going to publicly now do it. I'm going to challenge Mr. Kaepernick. It's great to say, hey, listen, I don't like what's happening, and I'm going to protest. I'm going to kneel. Colin Kaepernick is a quarterback in the NFL who decides not to stand for the national anthem because of the violence that's happening to his young black men. But yet he doesn't vote. So then you're just exercising awareness, which I appreciate, but there's blood on that ballot box. People marched, white and black, poor and rich, in Selma, and died in the Alabama River to give you that right to vote. And even if you think it's stupid and it has no impact, you should exercise that right because of what they did, out of honoring them. If you think they were stupid, say, I think you're stupid, but I'm going to exercise it right. These are the tools that knowledge brings you. And in that continuum, you have to be aware that Michael Brown happened here, Dred Scott happened here, and it's an ongoing thing because, like all beliefs of original sin, the idea of original sin and America's original sin is to constantly be aware that you are not perfect, that you have been sinful as a nation, and we have to repair that ongoing. So the people who say, hey man, that's in the past, no, it's not. It's America's original sin. So let's constantly ask for penance by changing the way we engage each other. That's how you prepare students to deal with the Michael Brown issue. That's how your education impacts the change, and that's how we will move forward as a community, as a family of America. That's my answer.
Right. So in addition to the hundreds of educators and education leaders in this space, as I'm sure you know, mentors play a big part of the big picture learning design. Mm-hmm. Both mentors within the school, but also professional outside of school that have a shared interest as our students. Would love to hear from you. Who were some of your mentors growing up? And then who are some of the folks that you're currently mentoring?
and I'm really going to be brief, all right, because all my answers
No,
have
you're
been
not,
too
brother.
long.
No, you're not.
Yeah,
No,
yes.
you're not.
Too long. I grew up in New Orleans. I became an actor, and actually, now I realize that they also taught me how to be an artist who was involved in community. There was a group called the Free Southern Theater in New Orleans that came together during the Civil Rights Movement, and they performed plays during the marches and around the South under the threat of violence from the Klan. And they actually were centered in New Orleans in the community. It was a community theater. And they were famous for doing plays under the threat of violence, as I said. And in one particular instance in Mississippi, they did the play, and the Klan said, if you do the play, we will kill you. And they did the play. They went off, and people applauded and applauded. They were waiting for the curtain call. But they got in the car and came back to New Orleans. They didn't come out for their curtain call. They inspired me. I actually never saw them. Because of the adult plays and because of the adult subject matter, my parents wouldn't let me go. But it shows you the power of storytelling. I would wait for my parents to come back from the play. And I can see myself looking out of the window and seeing the lights come down the street and pull in the driveway. And I say, tell me about the play, tell me about the play, tell me about the play. And then they would give me the clean version of the play. But I grew up, and they were all my heroes. John O'Neill, Denise Nicholson, who was on Room 222. The beautiful Denise Nicholson. And Eric Lauderdale, and Big Daddy. I don't know his name, but everybody called him Big Daddy. And Gilbert Lewis, who was a great director. They were a part of the Free Southern Theater. The other people that inspired me were those who are the actors that I wanted to be. James Earl Jones, Roscoe Lee Brown, Godfrey Cambridge. You may know the first two, but know Godfrey Cambridge, and look up James Edwards and Paul Rodriguez. These were men who looked like me, you know, men of color who were in films and obscure television shows, and I'd never see, every once in a while I would see it on television. But then, of course, for me, my hero was Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. And Sidney Poitier came to a play that I was doing in Pasadena. I'll never forget. And I was so excited. I knew he was there. I did the play, and I'm finally going to meet him. And I'm getting dressed, and I open the door to my dressing room, and there he is, standing. That's how I met Sidney Poitier. I love you. I just want to say thank you. You changed my life. And of course, Sidney Poitier is the coolest dude in the world. He goes, man, don't worry about that, Wendell. You were so magnificent. I was like, man, you are still cool at 80. You are fine. Then I had the opportunity to meet Harry Belafonte last year and give him an award. And his life and legacy, I realized, impacted me because he was also, the best phrase is never lose the ability to be offended. And that's Harry Belafonte. He never lost the ability to be offended when he saw injustice or something that needed to be righted. I would never deny anyone the right to say that's their belief, but I would have to stand up and say, but I think that belief is wrong because it offends me, it offends my value system. And Harry Belafonte never allowed that to put him in check or stop what he's doing. And then I realized he's not the first one. There was Paul Robeson before him. There was Harold Clurman and Clifford Odets out of New York, the Lower East Side Jewish artistic community. So there's all of these people that had an influence on me, understanding that my art is not separate from being aware of its impact and realizing that that's the role of art, the forum in which we reflect together on what our values are, declare them, and then act on them. Who I'm mentoring today, I'm trying to mentor by example. I don't have any kids, but I got nieces and nephews who always need tuition. So I hope them checks I'm writing are like a mentorship. Every parent in here who has a kid in college knows what I'm talking about. I was like, I don't have any kids, but I know the pain of writing tuition checks. I hope to live by example. I am so flawed. And I have a tendency of being able to start things but not actualize them and realize them in its full extent. I wanted to have 100 homes done in Pontchartrain Park by now. I only have 40. But it's 40 homes. You know what I'm saying? Geothermal, solar, LEED certified. So those are my mentors, and those I'm trying to mentor.
Well, I'm sure we have a number of young folks here who will be reaching out and with an interest in your mentorship, even if it's from a distance.
Anyone here, I will mentor. I will gladly mentor. Actually, see, you learn from them. As educators, you know. You learn from them as much as you give to them. Because this morning, I was reminded of a time when, young people, there will be moments in your life that you have to reassess what you're doing. Because for me, it was recent, and I was wondering if my best days were behind me. I keep looking at Nassim, because he was the first cat I met this morning. But I mean, Nassim, spitting it, you know what I'm saying? If I were not a little manager and really silly you, I will give you my advice upon the subject willy-nilly. I would tell you, I could spit too, yo.
You forgot.
Not like you, bro, not like you. But there'll be times where I was wondering if my best days were behind me. That's a middle-aged thing. It happens everywhere. I don't know why they call this middle age. I hope you in your 50s. I'm like, man, I'm kind of like three-quarter age, I got to live to 100 to be middle-aged. Oh, so you start, oh, man, as my mother used to say, I'm on the other side of the hill. I'm like, oh, my God, And so all the teachers went, oh, my God, this guy. Bring back all of my issues. But what you did and what the Purple Revolution did, St. Paul in Minnesota, what I saw, what the Washington kids did, which literally sounded like rain. I love that. That makes you go, oh, I remember. You reminded me of that young artist in myself. How dare I let that go away? So thank you for giving me that fire again. This wasn't just a flight to St. Louis to talk to some educators or whatever. I came here, this was my gift. This was a blessing that I didn't see coming. That you guys got up there and reminded me of what I used to be. Thank you.
Amen. Still are, brother. All right, as educators, we believe in various modes of teaching, right? Like,
yes.
So you have your auditory learners and folks that need to see it and learn best that way. I have a couple of images I want to share. And no worries, nothing incriminating.
Okay, that's all right.
We're good.
I can deal with my incriminating
No
images
doubt.
too. Put them up there.
All right, add that slide back. We're going to use it.
This is not water, this is vodka.
Would just love to get would love to get your initial reaction to each one of these slides. All right, here we go.
One of my great heroes. First of all, young people. Can you imagine being that young and being told you can't go to school? To the school around the corner from where you live. That's in the Lower Ninth Ward. Francis is the school. And that's the image of Ruby Bridges breaking segregation. It makes me think of my oldest brother because he was in 9th grade when they integrated the schools in New Orleans. It also makes me think of the power of art, because Norman Rockwell, this very erudite New Englander, saw what was happening in the South and said, how can I impact people to make them understand how awful that is? And he painted that picture as an artist. So art is not just some insular thing. And I'm almost certain that that image, first of all, it honors Ruby, and I met her. It shows you the power of art, and I'm sure that some hardcore racist bigot in New Orleans who said, I will never let a nigger into my school, saw that and said, what the hell am I doing? And it changed his life. Because while laws change our behavior, art can change our heart and our mind, and that's why I'm an artist. So that is an honor to my brother. That is an honor to Ruby Bridges, and an honor to Norman Rockwell, people from disparate walks of life. This middle-aged white New Englander with a little black girl in the South, and how art can impact people that you don't know. My brother, and honoring him in 9th grade when he, 7th grade, went into Capdo. Honor him now that he's deceased, actually. And then the many people that saw that painting, and it actually changed their view and changed their idea. Someone who's very dear. God, I'm crying so much this morning. I don't know why.
This is what we do.
That's what you do. It's a big picture, huh? All right. There's so many personal connections. I took my parents in their 80s to see the inauguration of President Barack Obama. Right? And for two people who had suffered through the worst of racial violence, my father fought in Saipan and came home and couldn't even walk in the French Quarter, couldn't even buy a house, couldn't vote, but yes, risked his life for this country. So I took them to see Obama inaugurating. And I had my mother and my aunt, who was also in her 80s, and I brought them in wheelchairs to put on the platform. My brother and I had to stand off the platform. And I don't know how she got on the platform, but she did. And Ava was a publicist, and I heard she had done a film, but it was even before she started doing films. And she said, she met me and said, Wendell, I sat with your mother during the inauguration. And my mother died 4 years ago, and Ava said, here's the picture. Wow. And I didn't have an image of it was a picture of my mother at the inauguration with Ava DuVernay. So she's the woman who captured one of the most beautiful moments in my mother's life. That's who she is for me first. Then she became the Ava DuVernay, who was this great filmmaker. And I will not say the actor's name, but talk about the wealth of knowledge. He didn't have the wealth of knowledge of knowing how important Selma was, so he turned down the job of playing Hosea Williams because he thought it was too small of a role. And I thought, wow, he literally does not know history. This is the man standing next to the man on the bridge of Selma. If there's one small role you want, is to play Hosea Williams, who was next to John Lewis on Bloody Sunday on the Selma Bridge. They ain't gonna cut your scene out, bruh. They can't. I'm not gonna say who the actor is, because you'd be like, what? It's not Cedric the Entertainer now. We in St. Louis. No, it's not Cedric. I'm not gonna say his name. He'll kill me. He'll kill me. He'll kill me. He'll kill me. And then, no, yes, this is being streamed right now, going all over the world. I ain't gonna say his name. And I'm gonna stop crying too. But she didn't even have to direct us on that bridge. And she gave me one of the greatest moments to be a part of that movie, because that's gonna be a classic that will educate people as to what people did and how much they sacrificed. A reminder of how important it is to be involved, and that we honor those who lose their lives for this country and its Constitution on foreign shores. And what that film did is to remind us of the people that gave their lives for this country on domestic shores. Because I looked into that Alabama River and I thought about all the souls who at the other end of a barrel of their neighbors said, I hope someone remembers me. I hope I am dying for a reason. And that last moment of their death, I stood on that bridge and I could look at the river and to those souls who were lost in that river and said, we did not forget you, we honor you, and this is for you to make sure that you're remembered. Because so many people died in the loneliness of the night at the hands of their neighbors so that we could actually exercise our right to vote. There's blood on that ballot box. Never forget it. And she gave me that moment. And she's a great filmmaker.
She is. So speaking of ballot boxes.
Wow. I'll be honest, I have a complicated relationship with the mayor of New Orleans. I actually told my parents to vote for him when he first ran. I thought this is what we need new vision. His father is revered because he integrated City Hall. His family is hated in New Orleans because they motivated the city to move forward in the late 60s and 70s to integrate. His father was the HUD secretary with Carter, Moonlandrew, who said, we're going to change urban America and make sure that people have access to decent housing. So it has a great family legacy. Politics can corrupt. As we all know, power corrupts, absolutely, as the saying goes. Because a friend of mine ran against him, he saw me as an enemy, as an adversary. The worst thing you could do in a mayor's race is come in second, because they'll do everything possible to dirty and sully you because you are the competition. I understand that. But once you become mayor, you're the mayor of the city. So if you're my competitor, I'm like, hey man, you're opening BPL, I'm giving the opening address. I disagree with you, but I'm going to co-opt it, which he could have done with anything we tried to do. But he spent his first 4 years doing everything possible to stop any sort of work that we were doing. And a part of that was we were opening grocery stores in underserved communities. One in the lower Ninth Ward that had not been a decent grocery store in the lower Ninth Ward. Lower Ninth Ward is what the South Side is to Chicago, what any depressed neighborhood, a certain side of Delmar Street here. I don't know which one, but there's one side that, and one side is, oh, wait a minute. We were bringing a grocery store to a food desert, the lower Ninth Ward, and hadn't had a decent grocery store. You know about it from Katrina, hard hit. Goldman Sachs was financing the project. We had met with the community. It was all over the news that Wendell Pierce and his partner tried to do it. My partner being Troy Henry. Goldman Sachs met with the mayor, came out and said, we're not financing it anymore. So he's not the mayor, not the politician, whatever. He's the guy that stopped the grocery store from going into the Ninth Ward, in my eyes. I don't know what was said in the meeting. All I know is Goldman Sachs was financing it going in, and they came out and they weren't financing it. And he was the only guy in the meeting. So, that's my take on it. Then he's up for re-election. He has not done anything for the lower Ninth Ward. He stopped economic development and all. But then he says, I'm going to take down all the Confederate monuments. Which, for any black person in New Orleans, you're going to say, yeah. What? They enslaved me, they killed me, there's violence, they are traitors to America, let's take them down. And for me, that was just a patronizing political trick. He had not done anything for the communities. He actually stopped economic development. I don't mind the fact that you don't want to come to my community, but now I decide to exercise my right of self-determination. I'll do it myself. I don't need Winn-Dixie to come, or Publix, or Whole Foods. I'll bring my own grocery store. And then you stop it, and then you tell those same people, hey, I'm going to take down the Confederate monuments. So vote for me, Negroes. So I found it to be a political trick. Those who opposed him taking down the monuments, this is going to get me in trouble, especially if this streams. They hated him. It reminded them of, there's the land Jews again, you know, bleeding heart liberals, the progressives. And so he won re-election. That was 4 years ago. He didn't take down those monuments until he's like, oh man, I'm out of office in 2 months. And I got to take them down now. He waited because all of those people who he offended, he didn't want to offend them anymore. The political trick worked. Black folks put him back in office, and he didn't take down the monuments. Still hasn't done any economic development in those black communities either. So I keep telling them, you have been hoodwinked once again. Because he has been a great mayor. But it's a tale of two cities. Like it's always a tale of two cities. He has brought in major economic development downtown. He has brought in new technical, innovative companies downtown. And New Orleans is 20 minutes apart, every part of it. Less than that. But if you are in the lower Ninth Ward or in Gentilly, there's no economic development. If you try to exercise your right of self-determination and build your own economic engine, he's doing everything to suppress it. So the empress has no clothes in my eyes. He's being praised for bringing down his monuments. And so now that he's leaving this democratic city, okay, no politics, but now that he's leaving this democratic city in this red state, he pulls another political trick the other day. We should give Mr. Trump a chance. We think it should be, and I'm like, because he wants to run for a state office. That's what it brings up in me. So I said I wasn't going to say that, but then again, the kids got me crying and all of that stuff. And, you know, I'm like, hey, what do I have to, oh my God, I just realized something. What do I have to lose? Everything. But we can't afford those tricks. I was telling the driver last night, great driver, guy named Rick Gannon. Use him. He's a driver here in St. Louis. Find out where he is and use him. Rick Gannon. I'm a capitalist. I am a capitalist. The people that claim to be capitalists now are not. Because a capitalist means I want everyone to be educated. I want as many people to get educated because that means there's going to be more ideas, better competition. The best ideas will be actualized, and then wealth in knowledge, in health, and in finance will grow. That's what capitalism is about. Give everyone an access. These so-called capitalists, everyone access to education. That's socialism. There's a finite amount of wealth. Only my kids will get opportunity because I don't want them to compete with Nassim. There's only so much wealth. Nassim she's gonna be bad. I don't want, and the kids from Washington too, and Nassim is like, man, I'm getting props. No. Oh, but those people, there's only so much opportunity. There's only so much wealth. There's a finite amount of wealth in knowledge, opportunity, finance. Like I said, and that's how they think. BPL, we got to stop them. They want to give everybody an opportunity. Now, speaking of New Orleans, I'm going to be brief. I know you got another picture. So all charter schools now. I go back and forth because of what I see in New Orleans. They build those charters the opposite way that BPL works. Those charters are built not for those who may not find a school that's working for them, who doesn't have mentors in their life saying, look at all the different opportunities and choices. They build it for the people who have everything and go, ooh, I can sit and choose and pick my school. And if that kid needs special education, there is no obligation to get a charter in New Orleans where you have to provide special education. You can raid the treasury of our public education tax dollars and get money for your charter school and get your charter every year without any obligation for the least of our brothers and sisters, those special need kids, whatever. Kids who may not work in a traditional school, who want an alternative way of working. They're thrown to the wayside. And so that's the issue. That's where you have to watch, like I said, for people who do not have your best interest at heart. Because those same privatized education companies who are getting charter schools, who do not have to build a school for Nassim, and for the kids who say, well, music helps me understand trigonometry and how math can be finite and creative, but I understand what it's like to play a chord change and solo within it. So technique and creativity coming together, which is what calculus is what we just saw when these kids played. They found a way to get to that same understanding. Those charter schools don't have an obligation to help them get there. And how do they keep that going? Making sure that they put people on the boards that never put it in the law that they have to. So do we have to get our charter? Do we have to give special needs kids an opportunity? Nope. You can still get the charter. Here's your check. There are those who do not have your best interest at heart. You have to be vigilant to make sure we give these kids that opportunity. And that's around the world. The woman who's building the school in Kenya, you know, there are going to be those who come from London who say, no, this is a proper way. This is the way we do it in Eton. And we don't understand culturally why you want to have a certain day go a certain way. It has to be this way. And if there's one culture that understands classism and colonialism and imperialism, it's them folks in London. So you have to watch that. You have to be vigilant. Because what happens is they rationalize it. And what they try to do is great. So I forgot how I got there, but yeah, that's Mitch Landrew. You are never going to invite me back again. They were like, boy, he's crazy. Next picture, please.
So before I bring up the last slide, I'm going to ask, because I know that this one could go in multiple ways.
Oh, uh-oh.
So I'm going to ask you, if you would,
Be brief, brother, be brief.
3 words that come to mind with
Okay.
this brother. Three words.
The 3 words we should remember: Ron and Nicole. Now, I gave you your 3 words, now I'm going to take my 10,000. No matter where you are, 2 people lost their lives. We should never forget that. We should be vigilant once again for those who do not have our best interest at heart, who use the story of what he has become to just ginny up people's emotions on both sides and get them worked up so that they can ultimately put it in a special this Sunday at 8 o'clock and sell marketing time and make money from it. There was no reason to show his parole hearing on television under the guise of it's an important story. It really was just sensationalism to make money. Then the other side of it was, I think it was important, the documentary that was nominated for an Oscar. I don't know if it won the Oscar. Mr. Edelman's documentary really put people's reaction to the first trial in perspective, so people on both sides could understand what was happening in Los Angeles. Latasha, I can't think of her last name now, a little girl who was killed right before. Rodney, by a grocer who shot her in the back of the head and got probation. We all saw Rodney King and how they broke it down, and our lying eyes, man, you know. We thought videos would just solve everything, and you see a Rodney King of that generation, and then you see a Philando Castile in this generation, and it's just, no one's held accountable. But it put in perspective, that documentary put in perspective what caused the circus around this trial, because it wasn't about this trial, it was about a mounting tension that was happening in Los Angeles about how people were being treated and the injustices of the criminal justice system and the injustices of the police system. So what happens is this became a focal point of that, of jury nullification. If you don't know what jury nullification is, it's like no matter what, because of the criminality and abuse in the criminal justice system, there's an active movement of getting on juries to nullify anyone. William Kunstler, who was a lawyer that the older folks here will remember in New York, ACLU, he would take on some of the worst cases, the worst criminal cases and all, because he believed no individual crime could ever surpass the crimes of state. So we would take on blatant murderers, but he would always defend them because he said there's no crime. So all of those issues were tagged on to this trial, but now what it has become is just a cheap way of making money. If we bring up this trial and all you have to do is throw the picture up and you say, wow. It's a Roche, I don't know how to say it, Rorschach test. It's a test. It's a litmus test. Change it up if you can't. If you can't say the word, do something synonymous. It's a Rorschach. It's a litmus test. And so, to me, when you throw up a picture of this man, it's just like when you turn on the radio and listen to Rush. Rush Limbaugh doesn't believe half the stuff he says. But he makes $100 million a year. He makes $100 million a year. So he's going to ginny up the emotions in the pot. He's going to stir the pot because it makes money for him. Rush Limbaugh came out against our film, you know, oh, they're going to just ruin Clarence Thomas with this new confirmation film. Kerry Washington and it's just going to, you know, they're going to praise Anita Hill and just put him down because he's a conservative justice. But I like that actor, Wendell Pierce, playing Clarence Thomas. I liked him on The Wire. He said that on the radio. And I was like, wow, I didn't know Rush Limbaugh liked me. So I told my people, I said, call Rush Limbaugh. I'll have lunch with him. You know, I don't need to go on the show. He likes me. I want to meet him because he is crazy. I want to, you know. But I don't mind meeting him, you know. And he didn't return our calls. Even after he said, I like Wendell Pierce. But I suspect he didn't return the calls because if somebody had gotten a picture of us, it would ruin his whole brand. Well, Rush Limbaugh sitting down with an Obama guy and having dinner. He was mad that he said, I like that actor, and then found out later that for full disclosure, I raised money for Obama's campaign. You know, and then I thought about it. I said, how sad, because he really doesn't want to impress upon me his belief of what he thinks is best. He just wants to make that $100 million a year on radio, ultimately. So he's just ginning up the pot. And that's what he has become. Quick way to make money. He's no different than Kim Kardashian.
All right, I know that we're running short on time, so
I apologize,
know initially
everybody.
said it's quite all right. No need to apologize, Wendell.
I hope that I've made some sense.
Yeah.
I hope you know that you are doing God's work, even for those of you who don't believe in God. I hope you students understand that you are so powerful when you exercise your right of self-determination. And know that there are those who don't have your best interest at heart and will always see that you are suspect, and it has nothing to do with just race or class or gender. No matter who you are, there will be people who don't have your best interest at heart. But when you have the power and the skills and the wealth of knowledge, as a single person, you can change the world. You can change the world and leave a great legacy and really become the person that you want. And for those of you who I will now fully disclose came here with a little chip on your shoulder, and who is this BPL? What is this Big Bang? Should I even consider this group? Should I even consider this methodology and programming? I hope you have come across the line like I have, and I publicly say that I fully support the idea of what this knowledge, student-based initiative is all about. Where I came here weary, I leave here emboldened and in full support and give a full-throated endorsement to BPI. So I say to Elliot, right? Thank you. And for the many times we were supposed to talk, I'm glad that we're talking publicly now, thank you for what you've created. And I wish you many, many more decades of success. I'll take your questions now.
So we are going to take one question, and it's going to come from a student.
That's great.
Of course I was going to stand up.
And say your name and where you're from and all that stuff.
Alrighty. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Halima Scott. I am from Camden, New Jersey, and I attend Camden Big Picture Learning Academy. Okay, so first can we thank Mr. Pierce for his words of encouragement and his knowledge.
Thank you, Halima.
And my question to you would be, how did Hurricane Katrina affect you personally, and what motivated you to begin the reconstruction process?
It destroyed the entire city, but it literally destroyed my neighborhood. You know, if you lose your house in a fire or whatever, the community is there. People will reach out to you. When you lose your entire neighborhood, you feel like the world has come to an end. I remember when I was going back and forth, I met someone in the airport. We cried because I hadn't seen them in months. And the guy next to me said, well, oh, who was that? You finally reconnected? I was like, that's the lady that takes my ticket at the basketball games. Mm-hmm. But just to see her, life was coming back together. It was the worst and darkest hour in our city's history, recent history. What inspired me to do something about it was the legacy of my parents and my community, how hard they fought so my father could buy a little $13,000 house in 1955 and take all 30 years to pay it off. Mm-hmm. I owed it to him. I owed it to my grandfather and grandmother who had a little 40-acre sugarcane farm in Platteville, Louisiana, which I now own, who had to fight just to get that land, where their parents were enslaved. I owed it to them to rebuild it. That's what motivated me. And then I owed it to you, Halima, so that when you stood up right now and said, in New Orleans' darkest hour, Mr. Pierce, what did you do? I wanted to be able to have an answer. And so my answer to you today is I rebuilt my neighborhood brick by brick, house by house, block by block, and we're back. I tried to open a grocery store business. It's now down to 4 convenience stores. In underserved communities, grocery store business is hard. Don't go into it. Don't go into it. In underserved communities, in food deserts, because this is the thing, the gift I want to give to you, if you're an entrepreneur. We can look at India and China and see emerging markets, developing markets, but we refuse to look at South Central Los Angeles and South Chicago and the lower Ninth Ward and see that that's emerging markets too. In Baltimore. So I wanted to have an answer for you. I was inspired by the question I knew I would get asked in the future by a young person like yourself, Halima. In New Orleans' darkest hour, what did you do? So that's what I did in New Orleans. We negotiated to get properties that were given back to government, given to us so we can redevelop them. We went to food deserts to build grocery stores. And then I saw 2 years ago my second home, because when I was in the wire, I had a ball in Baltimore. And it exploded. So my answer to what I saw in Baltimore is to join with a young African-American developer there, and we have put together a $27 million apartment complex that we are developing now in the Art District with 110 units. We broke ground this fall, and we'll be cutting the ribbon in November. We created 135 jobs, construction jobs. We will have 45 permanent jobs there. But more importantly, we put together the DAP program, Developers Apprentice Program, where we're teaching young people like yourself how to be developers. So they have worked on our project, we have paid them their stipend, and now when they learn how to develop and they want to go into their community and build and develop, not only did they have a job, they learned how to develop, and we will be their first investor, giving them $100,000 on each of their projects. That's exercising your right of self-determination, and that's what motivated me. And Katrina did that for me.
Thank you.
So right before we wrap, you had mentioned earlier, Wendell, about our collaboration on this piece with Sylvie and Seymour.
Yes.
We want to show a brief 30-second, not 30 minutes, 30.
So everybody, oh, wait a minute, my ribs.
30-second clip of that piece, real quick.
Fantastic.
Debuting here at Big Bang.
Seymour and Sylvie were graduating high school, and they had college acceptance letters in hand. But Sylvie was having second thoughts. Seymour, I'm not sure I want to go to college anymore. Seymour was stunned. What do you mean? You've landed some great scholarship money. You have to go. Look, best friend, Sylvie said, my big sister left home to head to medical school last year. She's happy. That's great, but that's her journey. Me? I'm already doing what I love, and I love learning so much from everyone right here in the shipyard. This is me.
Hey. Now, who said Sylvie couldn't run her own business?
That's right.
All right, I mean, don't say, okay.
So before we wrap, just want to bring up that last slide, if we could, Brian, that we had, which is a quote by St. Louis native Dr. Maya Angelou. But I think it's very appropriate as we close. Quote reads, life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. So just like to say publicly here on behalf of all of us at Big Picture Learning, thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you for continuously taking our breaths away, and for your philanthropy, for your advocacy, for your dedication to your community and to your people. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you.